r/AskReddit. What's your best fire me, I fucking dare you moment from work? Worked a job where I was the only one who knows how to take apart, clean, fix, and put all the equipment back together and do the weekly and monthly maintenance. Had a boss tell me one day that I was doing a poor job and not doing enough and that anyone could do it. If I didn't step up I would be fired, or else, as they had manuals for each piece of equipment. So that night I took apart all the equipment, weekly and monthly stuff too, cleaned them, and then just left it apart for them to figure out that morning. Then I turned off my phone after getting home for the entire day, as I had the day off. When I turned it back on the next day I saw that I had initially received angry texts ordering me to return and put everything back together. This lasted an hour. Then texts saying I risked being fired. Then texts begging me to return. Then more texts trying to compromise with Ot. Then an apology before nothing else for the rest of the day, other than that the head boss wanted to see me as soon as I came in the next day. And over half the stuff was still not put together, and what had been put together was put together haphazardly and would need to be taken out again then put back in correctly. Was immediately asked to be seen by my boss and their boss to explain myself the moment I was seen entering. Once in the office I told them that if they weren't there to apologize then just fire me then and there, or drop it and let me put all the stuff back together. They looked at each other and then told me that I could get back to work. Boss never called me lazy again. I worked at an unspecified telecom a few years ago. I was a senior manager in charge of programming, third level support, and production support. A business unit bullied through code changes made by the business side through a side deal with a legacy programmer in the data center, circumventing my team, cabin production testing that just had to get implemented immediately without going through any testing at all. I refused. The SHIO overruled me 72 hours later. Phone activations had ground to a halt. Customers nationwide were screaming, and the SHIO called phone conference after phone conference demanding timelines for when I was going to get this shit fixed. He kept screaming to have members of my team to get on the phone and explain themselves to him. I refused. Finally I snapped and told him that if he wanted me to fix his mistake I would need to get off the fucking phone, go work with my teams, and the only reason they hadn't walked out yet was that I was keeping him off their asses, but we would all happily go together. 24 hours later my team had the bullshit cleaned up and fixed for a clean rollout. This was all to avoid a 24-hour delay for production testing. I wish I could say that was the only / worst time. I was a summer teacher at one of those Korean SAT prep school that hired UPoint's college students for a summer and then promptly worked them to death. Although, I will admit the pay was pretty good. We taught 8.30 am through 5.30 pm with an hour lunch, but at home work to grade every evening, prep work, etc. Well, they were mainly focused on teaching English, but I was a math and physics major, so they had me teaching SAT math and college prep physics. No problem. Then they decided, since I studied physics, I should also teach their chemistry class. I tried to tell them I didn't know much chemistry, but they insisted. So I worked my ass off, refreshing myself on all of the stuff before I taught it, while still teaching another math and physics class. One day in the middle of this, I got legitimately sick. I called in the night before, per the rules, and told them I couldn't come in. I took one day off, sleeping in my apartment, and then dragged myself in the next day. When I show up, they pull me aside and say, "So how do you plan on making up the time for the classes you've missed?" Excuse me? Well, we didn't have anyone to teach your classes, so all the kids are behind now. You have to make up the time. We figured you could just extend your morning class now for the first week. I could teach over lunch, and your afternoon class could then start an hour early for the next week. Why didn't you have a sub teach my class? Then they screwed up. They said we don't have a sub. Well then, no, I'm not going to skip my lunch because of your guys' poor planning. We'll fire you, and then you won't get your plane ticket, remember? They replied. Go ahead. First, I followed the rules and gave you notice I was going to be out. Second, you just told me you don't have a sub for my classes. That means if I leave, you're going to lose all of those students that I'm teaching. That will cost you a lot more than the planet ticket will cost me. I just posted this in another thread the other day. It's not exactly what you're looking for, but since it was already typed up. I once worked as a night clerk at a privately owned, non-chain, hotel. As the overpass guy I often had to do things that weren't really a desk clerk's job, like bring extra pillows or blankets to guests, or clean up small messes, or occasionally plunge a toilet or something. There was no one else there at 2 AM, and so it just came with the job. One night I get a call from a room to the front desk and a guy says the toilet is backed up. It's the middle of the night, so I just change his room and I go to take him the keys to the new room and check on the situation. There is shit and piss all over the floor. It looks like they shoved an entire roll of toilet paper into the toilet. There is just shit and filth everywhere. It's disgusting. I probably should throw these guys out of the hotel, but I'm young and I honestly don't know how to handle it, so I hand them their keys and just stare at the mess as I use the room's phone to call my boss. I tell my boss about the situation and I don't know what I expected exactly. For him to call a plumber maybe? I'm not sure. Like I said, I was young and didn't have a ton of life experience. But he tells me to clean it up. And I sit there quietly just holding the phone for a second, and I say something like, no, this is too much, man. I don't even know where to start with this and it's disgusting. And he says, real aggressively and angrily, like this is my fault, it's your job to handle night shift problems. Clean it up. So I stood there looking at the floor and a piece of shit literally flowed through my vision in this pool of filth. And I came to the most wonderful realization of my life. A realization that made me so happy in that moment that I actually felt a little giddy and lightheaded. When it came to me, I realized I can just quit and go home. I'm not cleaning this up. I quit. I remember he said what? And then yelled some, but honest to God I don't remember what he said. I was almost laughing. Not at him or the situation, just in relief at the realization no one could actually make me clean up this pool of human shit. So I said I'd close the room off and go watch the desk until my shift ended, but I wasn't cleaning this up. He, in anger, just told me to get the hell out then, which was dumb, because it left literally no active employees anywhere on the premises for however long it took him to get there after I left. But that's what I did. I just left and went home. They tried to withhold my last paycheck when I went to get it, saying I was responsible for the cleanup cost and then that they didn't have to pay me because I left in the middle of a shift, but I knew that was bullshit even then and told them so. I think I literally said I don't know who I have to call about this, but I know you can't do that and I'll figure out who to call about it. So they ended up just saying we'll mail it to you, and they did. I actually kind of liked that job, but fuck, there are limits. This was about 5 to 6 years ago. I was the second in charge of our shipping department, making $11 an hour. The head of shipping had a mental breakdown, so I took over while he got help. About 3 weeks after he returned, the company released him because they didn't like him and I could do the job. When they told me they had released him, I asked if there were going to be interviews for the job, or was the job just mine, since I was number 2. I was told they were looking, but I would have a chance to interview once that process started. Fast forward about 6 months, and I'm still doing this job that pays around $50k a year for $11 an hour. We had some issues with staff turnover and process changes because the warehouse manager thought he knew best and would listen. They then tell me there wouldn't be a shipping manager, just a shipping lead, which would be an hourly position. I ask about a raise, get told my review is in 2 months, so just wait. I wait. 3 months. 4 months. Then one day, after a 14-hour night shift, I get a call from the WM telling me I have to come in right now. When I get there, he unloads on me 4 things that were beyond my control and mistakes other people made. We start yelling, and that's when I told him, I make $11 an hour doing this job. Ex-boss told me he got paid $50k a year to do. I don't need this shit. Give me a raise or I won't be back. I then went home and back to sleep. When I go back to work, I'm met by WM and Ops manager. They appreciate the hard work I've been doing and are putting me on a salary starting at 45k. Since ex-boss was there longer, I negotiated up to 48k. 2004. Worked at a municipality department. One day the programmers update the work PCs and block pretty much everything and anything. No internet at all. No authorization for installing anything. All games removed from Windows. They even removed the calculator function for some reason. Then the supervisor started moving coworkers around, and my entire team was dispersed across a gigantic building for no reason. We were the top team in terms of results. The supervisors simply hated our guts for some reason. So me and one of the coworkers tried to devise some way to have communication without having to travel for 5 minutes each time across the building and down a floor just to get to each other's desk and ask a simple yes or no question. We do this during our lunch break. Our supervisor butts in and asks what we are doing. We explain we are trying to save time and maximize communication and results. The supervisor, who doesn't like us anyway, says we should get back to work and quit trying to communicate through unauthorized means. Okay. We simply stopped trying to install Messenger on our phones. One day later the supervisor is looking for my coworker. I don't know where he is. I say so. Well then contact him through your Messenger. Program the one you told us to quit installing. Yes, we gave up on that, on your orders. She tried to get me fired for refusing to obey basic orders. I explained the situation to her superior. He let me get back to work and told me to ignore her from then on. I moved to a better post a few months later because she made my life unbearable from that day on. And I finally went and told the upper floor they'll either move me elsewhere or I quit. I used to work at a small, family-owned grocery store for a few years. We got a load in on Mondays and Thursdays, and we got passed over one Monday and the distributor said we'd get the missing load in on Thursday. So, what essentially happened was a double load and my two receiving partners were out sick. I was the only person in the warehouse / receiving at the time and got to take on 15 plus pallets of groceries that needed to hit the shelves immediately. I was specifically told to not go up front and to do what I could while the front end crew covered the aisles and cash registers. Well, a lot of them were either lazy, untrained, or just putting in their hours so they could pay bills. I put in my earbud, just one, and get to work. I'm halfway through checking in the pallets when I get called up front. So I ignore it and continue. Then I get called again. So I head up there and get yelled at by a new hire with a bad attitude to do your job and back for me. The customer was a regular and we got along very well, and she told me that she was fine and could bag her own groceries. Between the customer and the fact that I wasn't having it, I walked away. I had 3 years and 2 ranks on her, so I didn't give half of a shit and went back to my pallets. Then I get the newest hotshot manager, who replaced the old hotshot manager, who replaced the beloved manager who trained basically the whole store in my face about having an earbud in on the clock, which is allowed as long as you have on-air free, and said I could be sent home and not come back if I wanted to listen to music. So I gestured to the pallets and said go for it. These all need to be checked in and broken down. Have fun. I got to keep my earbud in. So I had that going for me, which was nice. Important note, my usual job was 3 AM noon, and I was sleeping from 5 PM to 1 AM. A split shift meant working 4:30 AM to 8 AM, and coming back to 7 PM to 11:30 PM. If I remember right, I had been working a series of split shifts and the wacky sleep schedule was really getting to me. I was told I would only need to do it 3 days in a row, but then it became 4 days, and then finally I went to sleep after the 4th shift, got woken up to my boss calling me and telling me I would have to work one more split shift. I told him no, and that I would come in for my usual schedule. He started to argue with me and asking me why it was a big deal, especially since I had worked it almost every day this week, so why not work one more? When I explained I was having issues with sleep and that I wouldn't come in, he was like, "But it's your job. I'm scheduling you for another split shift." And I just yelled at him, "Then I don't need this job." He started apologizing and that he would let me get some sleep. I hung up. I went to work the next morning for my usual split and everyone there was surprised to see me. My boss had told everyone he thought I might not show up at all and wasn't sure if I had quit. I worked my usual shift. My boss came in at 8 AM and began apologizing right away when he saw me. Then he said, "If working a split was so hard on you, you could have told me no." I just turned and went to lunch. I was hired on as a part-time assistant manager and then immediately told I would be working part-time at 2 different restaurants. I knew things were shady as soon as they gave me 2 separate paychecks. Then, less than a month later, they had someone go on vacation and needed me to cover their shifts. Suddenly, I was working 80-hour weeks. At the end of the pay period, I took my checks into the office and asked why I wasn't being paid overtime. They said that they weren't required to pay overtime because technically I worked 2 jobs. I looked them in the eye and said, "This is my 2 weeks notice for one of my jobs." They said they needed someone that worked 2. Are you formally telling me that my employer requires me to keep 2 separate payrolls so that you aren't required to pay me overtime? They said they couldn't afford to pay me overtime, and I stood my ground and told them that I would work a maximum of 40 hours per week. After a brief back and forth, they agreed. Then, about a week later, another manager had a death in the family. They scheduled me for 80-hour weeks again without asking, while the other manager took time off to grieve. Then, one day one of the payroll people came by one of my restaurants and politely asked, "How are you?" I said, "I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit stressed about the amount of hours I've been working for the last couple months." Then, she said, "You should be grateful you are getting paid." I immediately told her that wasn't true because I was owed for overtime and not receiving it, and then called the office and informed them that they needed to either write me a check with back pay for all the overtime or reduce my hours to 40 hours per week by the end of the day. Then, I told them that if I ever saw a schedule that had me listed for even 41 hours, I would walk immediately. They met my demands in that they reduced my hours. I ended up quitting less than 2 months later anyways, because it's really a shady business. I was in the military and was trying to take my vacation time before I lost the days. They denied my requests for different times and I hadn't had a day off in 3 months, and I was working 12 to 16 hour shifts most days. I was beyond done. I was teaching some new guys part of the tasks for one job. Everything was fine. I went somewhere else in the hangar to do something else on the plane. This quality assurance guy that everyone knew was a pain came in. I did my stuff good and he never bothered me, so I didn't pay him any attention. He started talking to one of the new dudes. He then asked to talk to me and pulled me aside. He then asked why I hadn't told the new guy about some super obscure caution about water under a grate in the hangar floor. Something that had nothing to do with our job, so it didn't matter. He was just being a pain. I was over the job and him, so I told him, "Listen Sergeant Cap, I've been denied my leave 4 separate times and I've been working for 3 months straight. So if you have a problem with the way I taught them, write me up. I don't give a ref asterisk 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 and you can stuff it up your a asterisk asterisk too." Tell my boss I said that. It was a little extreme, but I was pushed to the point. When I went back in I knew I was in deep because the guy walked out of my shop head's office and I got called right in. When I went in there, the shop head said, "I heard what happened out there. Submit the days you want to take leave right now and I'll approve it for you." Then told me I could leave. That's all I heard about it. I was shocked. I've been at the company a long time, therefore I know both day and night shift duties in and out, are well liked by our clients, and in charge of training the new recruits. Most work for us up to 6 to 12 months, before growing tired on the workload, or finding that they can't handle the job or just wanted cash enough to study up for something else. Anyway, they are heavily dependent on me. My closest boss threatened to fire me for being home one day and drinking beer when I was supposed to be at work 2 weeks prior. I had agreed to do overtime, but I wanted a new schedule so I would not miss it. I got a new schedule, but she had forgotten to fill in that day on it. She blamed me for it anyway and said it was grounds for terminating my contract. I dared her to do it and see how long we could stay in business. Similar story here, had a big staff meeting to plan for the upcoming year about holidays and such, so we could have the appropriately trained people on site to cover the guys that would be away. In the meeting I say to the owner, so do you want us to email you or the scheduler about this directly? He says both. So I say, okay, I'll email it in, but I will be gone for 2 weeks, and I tell him the date. He says that it's approved, but email it in. So I email it to him, the scheduler, and my foreman at the time. My holidays come, and on the last day I send my foreman a message, the usual, where are we, how has it gone, where's my company truck, who do I need to pick up tomorrow, the whole 9 yards. He fires back with, you didn't tell me you were taking days off, I'm gonna suspend you without pay for 2 weeks. Well, as you imagine, that didn't go well. I politely told him he could go fuck himself and that I had the emails and he was in the room when we discussed the exact dates I would be gone, and that his lack of planning wasn't my fault at all. So I phoned the owner, who I had happened to work for 7 years at this point, being the second longest employed person there, and told him that the 3 of us would be having a meeting in the morning to sort it out. So I write up my resignation and take it with me, along with my company phone, credit card and keys to the meeting, where the owner proceeds to fire the foreman after about 5 minutes and gives me the job as foreman for the cruise. Thanked me for bringing it to his attention as it had happened before, and as being the most knowledgeable person about our product and equipment, he gave me the job, which I had for the next 5 years till I destroyed my back and had to move on. I was a shift manager at a relatively quiet fast food restaurant. There was only 3 managers total, so it worked out 1 manager per shift, 2 management shifts a day, open and close. We were supposed to have 4 managers on a rotating roster, but cost cutting and laziness, we had a worker who ended up being my replacement when I quit. She should have been promoted at the same time as me, but sexism and again, cost cutting. Anyway, I agreed to pull a double for the other shift manager and come in early the next day for stocktake with the store manager. So from 6:30 AM to 10:30 PM Saturday I worked with no breaks. I stayed behind until 1 to do most of the stocktake and messaged the store manager that I'll be in for the open at 6, not the 4:30 for stocktake, as it was mostly done. I received no response. The next morning I arrive, finish stocktake by myself, and do the open shift without the store manager arriving. Turns out he had a heart attack and was in serious condition at the hospital, although I only found out later that night. The other shift manager rocks up for the close, and I go home looking forward to my well-earned day off. Until I get a call from head office informing me, not asking, informing, that I'm now working every open next week, except for Saturday, which I would be doing the close followed by stocktake on the Sunday again. So I change my plans and deal with it. Monday at 11 AM, I get a call from the other manager. He's had a pretty serious car accident, is in hospital for a few days. He won't be able to work for the week. If you've been keeping track, that's 2/3 of the management team down. I call head office and ask for someone to come and do some shifts so I can literally take a break. They reluctantly agree, and my afternoon shift for the next day, Tuesday, is covered, and they were trying to organize some more help. Our state manager ended up doing the shift they got covered, but they couldn't spare him or organize any more help. This is when I advise them that the store will be closed then, because I've worked 6 shifts in 4 days, and I had a limit to how much I could do with no breaks. For my personal safety I wouldn't work without breaks or a day off. Head office told me, if the store isn't open tomorrow morning, Wednesday by this point, you can find another job. This was said while I was standing next to state manager. So I put head office on speakerphone and asked them to repeat that. They do, and the state manager gets an angry look on his face. I told them to hurry up and fire me if that's the case. The call ends and he tells me take the day, I'll get it covered. He even put it in writing for me and gave me the close on the Thursday, so I got a longer rest. What a champ. I arrive on Thursday afternoon to see a manager from another store and the state manager, who informed me the head office representative I had been speaking to had been fired and that he had personally organized it, so I was no longer doing doubles. Shit returned to normal in a few weeks time, and there was talks of organizing another manager within the month. But the moment they started, I handed in my 2 weeks notice, as I'd gotten a better job elsewhere. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.